Hello and welcome to Bespoke Unit. I'm CP and in this video I'm reviewing the San Cristobal de la Habana La Punta. As per usual, this cigar review was conducted using the Bespoke Unit Cigar Formula, a quantifiable review matrix that you can use at home, or you can use it as a quick reference if you don't have time to watch the entirety of this video. Just head into the description where you'll find a link to the full written review, and you'll find the PDF final version of this, which will give you all the cigar's characteristics. Furthermore, the cigars were stored using this small Boveda acrylic humidor you see beside me. Typically I use a larger Boveda acrylic humidor, but this one has been set up with 65% Boveda packs rather than 69, which is our preferred RH for Cuban cigars. I also have a Boveda butler in there to monitor the cigars closely and ensure that they're all at the right RH. San Cristobal de la Habana is actually a more recent brand that was launched by Habana SA in Cuba. There was a brand that predated it that ceased to exist following the revolution, and so it was reintroduced in 1999. Its name comes from Havana's original name, which was named after San Cristobal. This is the La Punta. It is one of the initial vitolas that were launched in 1999 by Habana SA. It is a 5.5 by 52 campana pyramid. Being a Cuban cigar, it is needless to say a Cuban puro, meaning that all the tobaccos in the cigar are from Cuba, and it is made using an entubado construction method, which is where you roll up the leaves into tubes and you sort of twist them to create air channels. With that all being said, let's jump straight into the look and feel. Overall, this is a quite elegant cigar. It does have a couple of bumps here and there, physical bumps, but in terms of the roll, it's quite straight with a nice firm spring. The colour is reminiscent of a dark latte coffee or even potentially a hot chocolate. The sheen isn't overtly oily, although you do get the odd glimmer here and there. As for the veins, they can occasionally lean towards the more rustic side, but overall it is quite elegantly presented. In terms of aromas on the foot, you're going to get some nutmeg, some cinnamon, and that quintessentially Cuban terracotta note, which some people will consider to be somewhat musty. Next we'll be looking at the Prelight, which can always be a somewhat scary moment when testing a Cuban cigar. So in terms of the draw, it's a little bit on the tight side. There is some resistance. Again, these have been stored at 65% RH. You can easily massage it though to loosen it up. And what's the great thing about the pyramid shape is that you can cut it slightly at an angle, or you can work your way down until you get to the cap, of course, to change the airflow to what you like. I like a little bit of resistance when I smoke my cigars, so this is okay for me personally. In terms of flavor, you're still getting pretty much the same bouquet of cinnamon and terracotta, but you also have some suede leather rather than nutmeg. It's not quite as spicy, and there's a little bit of additional texture at the front of the tongue. Well, I guess the next step is to light this up and see what we get in the first third. So here we're well into the first third, and as you can see, I'm having some pretty aggressive waviness. I've touched it up ever so slightly so it doesn't get worse, but I'd much rather see if it manages to correct itself once in the second third. In terms of flavor profile though, this is a nice mild to medium smoke in terms of body, with a rich and complex bouquet in the opening third. We're looking at a lovely accord between some charred thyme, latte coffee, and there's a slight almost metallic bitterness at the tip of the tongue that is evocative of peanut, or specifically the peanut skins or the rinds. I'm not sure what you'd call those, but the brown skin that you can sometimes get on a peanut when it's in the shell. Overall, it balances very nicely on the palate. The charred thyme does give a bit of herbaceousness. That it's quite spicy, but there are no discernible spice notes just yet. Anyway, I'm looking forward to seeing how this progresses in the second third. Hopefully the burn will improve itself. Right, we're at the halfway point in the second third, and look at that burn. Isn't that excellent? Great ash backbone, and the burn line, although still a little bit wavy, has largely corrected itself. As for the flavor, the complexity is still very much there. The body hasn't increased all that much, although there is a slightly noticeable difference from the first third. As for its flavor profile, we're looking at a caramelized bouquet of some spices such as turmeric or curcuma, as well as a hint of marzipan. I'd also like to note that the latte coffee note is still lingering in there somewhat, and you do have some substance to this otherwise mild body. Although not yet at the nub, I'm well into the final third. Still a little bit of waviness on the burn line, but overall quite good. Still nice ash backbone as well. Its body has evolved somewhat. We're now looking at a medium plus rather than a mild to medium experience in the first 2/3, and there has been a distinctive evolution in flavor. We're looking at a composition of some nutmeg, leather, and earth. The earth isn't quite the musty terracotta note that we all associate with Cuban cigars, although that is certainly there. We're looking at something a little bit bolder. Meanwhile, the nutmeg and leather accord quite nicely, producing a spicy muskiness, which is certainly very pleasant on the palate. Its overall complexity is very nuanced. There's an intricate composition throughout each third. The mouthfeel stays smooth. In the first third, it's quite creamy, but then becomes a little bit chewier. The astringence is quite balanced. That being said, this palate stimulation overall tends to lean towards the front of the palate. You're certainly going to get a little bit more stimulation towards the tip rather than near the rear. The life cycle is very developed. As I mentioned, there are distinctive changes throughout each third. This is a cigar that certainly likes to tell a story. The finish is quite long and lingering on the palate, and the residual scent that it leaves in the room is overall fragrant and quite pleasant. Moving on to the burn, as I mentioned in the Prelight, the draw was a little bit on the tight side, but it does open itself quite nicely as you progress through the smoke. The temperature of the cigar is quite cool, and the burn angle does remain somewhat wavy throughout, but it's not really an issue at this stage now. The backbone is very, very strong. You get a nice solid ash on the cigar that holds together very nicely. You can produce some great stacks with this. And that leads me on to the overall experience. The band has a classical Cuban style, as you would expect. Although the brand is quite new, it does have a traditional appearance. The same can be said for the box, which tends to be of the more cardboard variety that is plastered with different stickers and decals. As for the value of the cigar, we're looking at about $11 for a single, but I've seen prices that go down to maybe just under $10. It depends really where you buy it. If you're in the USA, your options are somewhat limited. There are some retailers who will deliver to the USA, although it is a legally grey area, so I can't personally condone it. But there are sites like Havana's, Monte Fortuna, and Bellhop Cigars, and I've noticed among them some can be as low as $240 for a box of 25 and as high as $273. Then when it comes to the occasion and when you would want to smoke the cigar, this is a great cigar for around the lunchtime period. You could certainly enjoy it for the early afternoon all the way to the early evening. You can consider it as a digestif after a business lunch, or maybe even as an aperitif before dinner. Furthermore, it's a cigar that can be smoked casually, but you can certainly enjoy it in a more formal environment. And finally, we're going to talk about the pairings, and this is not something that is scored, it's just a thought exercise that we have at the bottom right-hand corner of every single review formula. So first of all, I would suggest if you're going to have something to accompany this cigar, would be perhaps a savory snack of salted peanuts. Alternatively, a pain au chocolat, or as the southern French like to call a chocolatine, would certainly bring out some of the more gourmand properties of the cigar. The yeastiness of the pastry with the chocolate pair quite nicely. And finally, if you were to have this as a digestif following a meal, consider something like a veal cutlet. The flavoursome meat is certainly going to be extended once you have the cigar. As for beverages, you can consider the usual suspects such as a Fine Champagne Cognac, an Añejo rum, or even a Highland single malt. I personally would probably go for latte coffee, perhaps as a digestif after a lunch, but in the early evening, one of these spirits would be a great option as well. That's all from me today. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, give us a like, give us a subscribe, and leave a comment if you have any questions regarding the cigar, or if you have your own thoughts that you would like to share. Until our next video, why don't you head to bespokeunit.com and see all the other men's lifestyle subjects that we cover. I'm sure that there'll be something that you will love.